You have been lied to about the most fundamental aspect of human existence, how power actually works. From childhood, you were told that if you follow the rules, work hard and wait patiently, control over your circumstances will eventually be granted to you by those who already possess it. You were taught that authority is earned through virtue, that influence comes through service, that power is bestowed upon the deserving by benevolent systems designed to reward merit. This is perhaps the most destructive lie ever told, because it transforms naturally powerful people into voluntary slaves who spend their lives begging for permission to live according to their own vision. It convinces you to ask for what you should simply take, to seek approval for choices that require no one's validation, to negotiate for control that is already rightfully yours. Tonight, we shatter this illusion completely. We will explore the brutal truth that every person who has ever wielded genuine power understood. Control is not a gift to be received, but a territory to be conquered. It is not earned through compliance, but seized through strategic action. It is not given to the deserving, but taken by those who understand that waiting for permission is the surest path to a life of powerless servitude. Over the next hour, you will discover why asking for control guarantees you'll never receive it, how the powerful maintain their position by convincing others to remain voluntarily weak, and most importantly, how to identify and take the control that is already available to you if you have the courage to claim it without apology. By the end of this exploration, you will understand that the choice facing you is binary and urgent. You can continue waiting for others to grant you the power to live your authentic life, or you can recognize that this power has always been yours to take. The foundation of your powerlessness lies in a carefully constructed myth that authority must be earned through virtue, that control is awarded to those who demonstrate worthiness, that power flows naturally to those who deserve it most. This myth serves the interests of those who already possess power by ensuring that potential challengers waste their energy seeking approval rather than seizing control. Examine how power has actually been acquired throughout human history, and you'll discover that virtually no one who wielded significant control received it through patient waiting or moral demonstration. They took it through strategic action, calculated risk-taking, and the willingness to act while others hesitated. The rulers of ancient empires didn't earn their crowns through virtue. They claimed them through conquest, alliance building, and the elimination of rivals. The founders of great corporations didn't receive their positions through merit evaluations. They created their own opportunities through innovation, market disruption, and competitive dominance. The leaders of social movements didn't wait to be appointed. They appointed themselves by taking action when others remained passive. Even in democratic systems, where power is supposedly distributed through fair processes, those who achieve significant influence do so by taking control of the mechanisms that generate power rather than simply participating in them. They don't just vote, they organize voters. They don't just run for office. They build the networks, raise the resources, and create the coalitions necessary to win. They don't wait for their turn. They create opportunities that make their success inevitable. The myth of earned authority is particularly destructive because it makes naturally powerful people feel guilty about their desire for control. You've been taught that wanting power is morally suspect, that ambition is selfish, that the drive to influence circumstances according to your vision is evidence of character defects. This moral framework ensures that people with the greatest potential for beneficial leadership spend their energy suppressing their natural drive for control rather than developing it strategically. They apologize for their ambitions, downplay their capabilities, and wait for others to recognize their worth, rather than demonstrating it through decisive action. Meanwhile, those who understand that control must be taken rather than earned move into positions of influence, while the morally constrained remain trapped in subordinate roles, wondering why virtue doesn't translate into power and why their patience doesn't produce the authority they seek. Consider how this dynamic operates in professional environments. The employees who wait to be promoted based on performance and seniority often watch as less qualified but more aggressive colleagues advance past them. The individuals who assume they'll be rewarded for loyalty and hard work are frequently overlooked in favor of those who actively position themselves for advancement. The person who takes control in professional settings doesn't wait for opportunities to be offered. They create opportunities through strategic relationship building, skill development, and visible value creation. They don't ask for promotions. They position themselves as the obvious choice for advancement by taking on responsibilities before being asked and delivering results that make their value undeniable. In business contexts, those who build successful enterprises understand that market control must be seized through competitive action rather than granted through fair processes. They don't wait for customers to choose them. They create value propositions that make choosing them inevitable. They don't hope for market opportunities. They create market disruptions that generate opportunities. The entrepreneur who takes control doesn't ask for permission to start their business, seek approval for their innovations, or wait for others to validate their vision. They act on their understanding of market needs, build solutions that serve those needs, and capture market share through superior execution rather than superior virtue. Even in personal relationships, those who experience satisfying connections understand that relational control must be taken through authentic self-expression rather than granted through people-pleasing behavior. They don't wait for others to appreciate them. They become genuinely appreciable through personal development. They don't seek approval. They develop self-respect that naturally attracts respect from others. The myth of earned authority is reinforced through institutional structures that appear to reward merit while actually rewarding compliance with existing power arrangements. Schools teach you to wait for teachers to call on you rather than speaking when you have something valuable to contribute. Employment systems teach you to wait for supervisors to assign opportunities rather than creating opportunities through your own initiative. These institutional patterns train you to associate power with permission rather than recognizing power as something you can exercise whenever you choose to do so. You learn to look outside yourself for authorization to act, rather than developing the internal authority that makes external permission irrelevant. The person who continues believing in earned authority spends their life in a perpetual state of audition, constantly performing for others who they hope will eventually grant them the control they seek. They remain dependent on external validation, while those who understand power dynamics act according to their own judgment and gradually accumulate the influence that comes from consistent strategic action. The truth that no one wants to tell you is that authority comes not from others' recognition of your worthiness, but from your own recognition of your power and your willingness to exercise it without waiting for anyone's permission or approval. An understanding that control must be taken rather than given is only the beginning. Actually, acquiring control requires understanding the specific mechanisms through which power is accumulated and maintained in real-world contexts. These mechanisms operate according to predictable principles that can be studied, practiced, and implemented by anyone willing to act strategically rather than hoping for lucky breaks. The first principle of power acquisition is what military strategists call initiative seizure, taking action before others do, positioning yourself advantageously before competition arrives, and creating circumstances that favor your success rather than waiting for favorable circumstances to develop naturally. Initiative seizure requires developing the capacity to act with incomplete information, to make decisions before you feel fully prepared, and to begin moving toward your objectives while others are still analyzing the situation. The person who takes initiative doesn't wait for perfect conditions. They create better conditions through their actions. In business contexts, initiative seizure means identifying market opportunities before they become obvious to competitors, developing solutions while others are still recognizing problems, and establishing market positions before others enter the competition. The entrepreneur who takes initiative doesn't wait for market validation. They create market demand through innovative offerings. In career development, initiative seizure means developing skills before they're required, pursuing opportunities before they're advertised, and solving problems before you're asked to solve them. The professional who takes initiative doesn't wait for promotions. They create roles that utilize their capabilities and generate value that makes advancement inevitable. The second principle is what economists call resource accumulation, systematically building the assets, capabilities, and relationships that provide options and influence in future situations. Power comes not just from taking action, but from having the resources necessary to sustain action and overcome resistance. Resource accumulation includes financial resources that provide independence from others' economic control, knowledge resources that enable superior decision-making, skill resources that create competitive advantages, and relationship resources that provide access to opportunities and information. The person who understands resource accumulation doesn't just work for immediate income. They build assets that generate ongoing value. They don't just learn what's required for current roles. They develop capabilities that will be valuable in future situations. They don't just maintain professional relationships. They cultivate networks that provide strategic advantages. The third principle is what political scientists call coalition building, creating alliances with others who share compatible interests, even when those interests aren't identical. Power is rarely accumulated in isolation. It typically requires coordinating efforts with others who can benefit from your success while contributing to it. Coalition building doesn't mean compromising your objectives to please others. It means finding people whose success is enhanced by your success and creating mutually beneficial arrangements that serve everyone's authentic interests. The powerful person understands that helping others achieve their goals is often the most effective way to achieve your own goals. In professional environments, coalition building means identifying colleagues whose advancement would be enhanced by your advancement and creating collaborative relationships that benefit everyone involved. In business contexts, it means finding customers, suppliers, and partners whose success is connected to your success. The fourth principle is what negotiation experts call leverage creation, developing advantages that make others want to cooperate with you rather than compete against you. Leverage comes from being able to provide something others need or being able to withhold something others want. Leverage creation requires understanding what others genuinely need versus what they say they want, and developing the capability to provide genuine value that cannot be easily obtained elsewhere. The person with leverage doesn't have to convince others to cooperate. Others seek cooperation because cooperation serves their interests. This leverage can be economic, providing valuable products or services; informational, having access to important knowledge; social, having relationships that others value; or competency-based, having skills that others need. The key is developing advantages that are difficult to replicate and genuinely useful to others. The fifth principle is what military strategists call strategic positioning, placing yourself in situations where success becomes more likely and failure becomes less costly. Strategic positioning means choosing battles you can win, avoiding unnecessary conflicts that don't serve your objectives, and positioning yourself to benefit from trends and changes that others don't anticipate. Strategic positioning requires thinking several moves ahead, like a chess master who positions pieces not just for immediate advantage, but for favorable outcomes in future scenarios. It means making choices based on where you want to be in 5 or 10 years, rather than just optimizing for immediate results. The sixth principle is what psychologists call confidence projection, acting with the certainty and authority that you want others to recognize in you. People tend to treat you according to how you present yourself, and confident presentation often becomes self-fulfilling through others' responses to your behavior. Confidence projection doesn't mean pretending to have capabilities you lack. It means acting with appropriate confidence in the capabilities you do possess. It means speaking with authority about subjects you understand, making decisions without excessive hesitation, and presenting your ideas with conviction rather than apologetic qualification. Perhaps most importantly, power acquisition requires what we might call strategic patience, the ability to pursue long-term objectives consistently, while accepting that significant results often require extended timeframes. Strategic patience prevents you from abandoning effective approaches because they don't produce immediate gratification. The person who understands strategic patience doesn't expect overnight transformation. They commit to consistent actions that compound over time. They understand that power accumulation is typically a gradual process that requires sustained effort rather than dramatic gestures. These principles work together synergistically. Initiative seizure creates opportunities. Resource accumulation provides the means to exploit opportunities. Coalition building multiplies your capabilities. Leverage creation makes cooperation attractive to others. Strategic positioning maximizes your advantages. Confidence projection influences others' responses, and strategic patience enables long-term success. The person who applies these principles systematically doesn't need others to grant them power. They create power through strategic action and accumulate control through consistent application of proven principles. They don't ask for authority. They develop authority through demonstrated capability and strategic positioning. The fundamental flaw in seeking permission for control is that asking for power immediately demonstrates that you don't understand what power actually is or how it functions. The very act of seeking permission reveals that you consider someone else to be the authority over your choices, which automatically disqualifies you from receiving the authority you're requesting. Power recognizes power. Those who already possess control understand that authentic authority cannot be granted. It can only be developed and demonstrated. When you ask for permission to exercise control, you're revealing that you don't possess the internal authority that makes external permission irrelevant. This creates what we might call the permission paradox. The people most qualified to exercise control don't need to ask for it, while the people who ask for control demonstrate through their asking that they're not qualified to exercise it. The request itself becomes evidence of the very powerlessness it's intended to overcome. Consider how this paradox operates in professional environments. The employee who asks their supervisor for more responsibility is implicitly acknowledging that the supervisor controls access to responsibility. The person who already possesses authority doesn't ask for additional responsibility. They identify needs and address them, creating value that makes formal authority recognition inevitable. The employee who waits for permission to implement improvements demonstrates that they view themselves as subordinate to existing systems. The employee who implements improvements and then reports results demonstrates that they view themselves as authorized to create positive change. The first approach reinforces powerlessness, while the second demonstrates and develops power. In entrepreneurial contexts, the person who seeks approval for their business ideas from investors, mentors, or potential customers is revealing that they consider others to be the judges of their vision's validity. The entrepreneur who demonstrates their vision's validity through action, market testing, and result generation doesn't need approval. They create evidence that makes investment, mentorship, and customer adoption logical choices. The permission-seeking entrepreneur asks, "What do you think of my idea?" The power-taking entrepreneur states, "Here's what I've discovered through testing this approach, and here's how you can benefit from it." The first approach invites judgment, while the second creates opportunity. Permission-seeking also fails because it places you in a reactive rather than proactive position. When you ask for permission, you're allowing others to set the criteria for what's acceptable, reasonable, or possible. You're accepting their judgment about what you should be allowed to do, rather than determining for yourself what you're capable of achieving. This reactive positioning makes you vulnerable to others' limitations, biases, and interests that may have nothing to do with your actual capabilities or the merit of your ideas. The person whose permission you're seeking may lack the vision to understand your potential, may have personal reasons for wanting to limit your advancement, or may simply be protecting their own position by preventing others from rising. When you seek permission, you're also accepting unnecessary delays while others evaluate your request. Discuss it with others, consider the implications, and make decisions about your life that you could make more quickly and accurately yourself. These delays often cost opportunities that won't wait for bureaucratic approval processes to reach conclusions. The permission-seeking pattern also creates what psychologists call learned dependence, the gradual erosion of your confidence in your own judgment as you become accustomed to having others make decisions about your life. Each time you seek permission instead of acting on your own authority, you reinforce the belief that others are better qualified to determine what you should do. This learned dependence becomes progressively worse over time because you never develop the experience and confidence that come from making autonomous decisions and experiencing their consequences. You remain trapped in a cycle where you don't trust your own judgment because you never exercise it, and you never exercise it because you don't trust it. Perhaps most importantly, permission-seeking fails because those who already possess power have strong incentives to maintain existing power arrangements rather than sharing control with potential competitors. The established authority benefits from having people seek their permission because it reinforces their position while keeping potential challengers in subordinate roles. The supervisor who controls access to opportunities benefits from having employees compete for their approval rather than developing independent authority. The investor who controls access to capital benefits from having entrepreneurs remain dependent on their decisions rather than developing alternative funding sources. The expert who controls access to information benefits from having others seek their guidance rather than developing independent expertise. These established authorities may appear to be evaluating your requests for permission based on merit, but they're actually evaluating whether granting your request serves their interests better than denying it. They're not asking whether you deserve control. They're asking whether giving you control enhances or threatens their own position. The system appears fair because permission is sometimes granted, but permission is typically granted only when doing so serves the interests of those who grant it, rather than challenging their fundamental authority. You receive small concessions that make you feel recognized while the basic power structure remains unchanged. Breaking free from the permission-seeking trap requires recognizing that most of the control you've been seeking permission to exercise is already available to you. You don't need anyone's permission to develop your skills, pursue your interests, create value for others, or make choices that serve your authentic development. You don't need permission to start projects that interest you, express ideas you believe in, or pursue relationships with people who share your values. You don't need authorization to invest your time in activities that develop your capabilities or to allocate your energy toward goals that matter to you. The control you've been seeking from others is control you already possess. You simply need the courage to exercise it without waiting for anyone's approval or validation. The moment you stop asking for permission and start taking appropriate action, you begin developing the authentic authority that makes others' permission irrelevant. Taking control without permission requires systematic implementation of specific strategies that demonstrate and develop your authority while minimizing unnecessary conflict with existing power structures. This implementation must be strategic rather than rebellious, building authentic influence rather than simply challenging established authorities. The first strategy is what we might call competence demonstration, developing and displaying capabilities that make your authority obvious to everyone involved. Instead of asking for opportunities to prove yourself, you create opportunities through independent action that showcases your abilities. This means identifying problems that need solving and solving them whether or not you've been asked to do so. It means developing skills that are clearly valuable and using those skills to create results that benefit others. It means taking initiative on projects that matter while ensuring that your contributions are visible and undeniable. Competence demonstration doesn't require permission, because you're not asking others to let you try. You're showing them what you can already do. You're creating evidence of your capabilities rather than making arguments about your potential. In professional contexts, this might mean researching solutions to persistent problems and implementing them on your own initiative. Instead of asking your supervisor if you can work on process improvements, you identify inefficiencies, develop better approaches, and present results that demonstrate the value of your independent action. The second strategy is value creation without authorization, generating benefits for others without waiting for official approval or recognition. This approach builds obligations and relationships that create natural authority rather than formal authority. When you create genuine value for others, they become invested in your success because your success benefits them. This creates organic support for your advancement that doesn't depend on formal authority structures or bureaucratic approval processes. Value creation might involve solving problems for customers, improving systems for colleagues, providing useful information to decision makers, or creating resources that help others achieve their objectives. The key is creating genuine benefit rather than just appearing helpful. The third strategy is strategic alliance building, identifying people whose success is enhanced by your success and creating mutually beneficial relationships that provide collective power. Instead of trying to gain control in isolation, you build coalitions with others who share compatible objectives. These alliances don't require formal agreements or official recognition. They develop naturally when people recognize that cooperating with you serves their interests better than competing against you or ignoring you. Strategic alliances might include colleagues who benefit from your expertise, customers who value your services, mentors who gain satisfaction from your development, or partners whose capabilities complement your own. The key is creating relationships based on mutual benefit rather than one-sided dependency. The fourth strategy is information advantage development, acquiring knowledge and insights that make you valuable to others and enable superior decision-making. Information is power when it's relevant, accurate, and not widely available to others. This doesn't mean hoarding information or keeping secrets. It means developing expertise that others find useful and maintaining awareness of trends, opportunities, and challenges that affect your field of interest. Information advantage might come from industry research, market analysis, technical expertise, regulatory knowledge, or understanding of organizational dynamics. The key is developing knowledge that enables you to provide unique value and make better decisions than those operating with less information. The fifth strategy is gradual authority expansion, incrementally taking on more control and responsibility without formal permission, while ensuring that each expansion is successful before moving to the next level. This approach builds authentic authority through demonstrated competence rather than dramatic gestures that might trigger resistance. Gradual expansion might involve volunteering for challenging projects, taking leadership roles in team efforts, making decisions within your current scope that demonstrate good judgment, or assuming responsibilities that others are avoiding or neglecting. The key is ensuring success at each level before expanding to the next level, building confidence in your capabilities while avoiding the backlash that might come from attempting to take too much control too quickly. The sixth strategy is alternative pathway creation, developing options and resources that reduce your dependence on existing authority structures. Instead of trying to rise within established hierarchies, you create alternative sources of opportunity, income, and influence. Alternative pathways might include developing independent income sources, building direct relationships with customers or stakeholders, creating valuable content or resources, or developing expertise that's marketable in multiple contexts. This strategy provides leverage in negotiations with existing authorities while creating options that don't require their approval. When you have alternatives, you can engage with established systems from a position of strength rather than dependence. The seventh strategy is confident execution, acting with appropriate certainty and authority while implementing your plans. Confidence in execution influences others' responses and often becomes self-fulfilling as people treat you according to how you present yourself. Confident execution means making decisions without excessive hesitation, communicating with authority about subjects you understand, and taking action without constantly seeking reassurance or validation from others. This doesn't mean pretending to have capabilities you lack. It means acting with appropriate confidence in the capabilities you do possess, while continuing to develop new competencies that expand your authority. These strategies work synergistically to create authentic power that doesn't depend on others' permission or approval. Competence demonstration proves your capabilities, value creation builds support, strategic alliances provide collective strength, information advantage enables superior decisions, gradual expansion builds sustainable authority, alternative pathways provide options, and confident execution influences others' responses. The person who implements these strategies systematically doesn't need to ask for control. They develop control through strategic action and demonstrate authority through consistent results. They create power rather than seeking permission to exercise it. Control is not given. It is taken without apology. by those who understand that authority belongs to those who exercise it competently and consistently. Your time for asking is over. Your moment for taking has arrived. What will you seize? Control is not given because those who possess it understand that sharing it diminishes their position. Authority is not awarded because those who grant it maintain power by keeping others in positions where they need to seek approval. But control can always be taken by those who understand that authority comes from competence, that power flows to those who create value, and that influence develops through strategic action rather than patient waiting. Every day you spend asking for permission is a day you could spend demonstrating your capabilities. Every moment you invest in seeking approval is a moment you could use to create results that make approval irrelevant. Every hour you dedicate to waiting for others to recognize your potential is an hour you could apply to realizing that potential through your own efforts. The world doesn't need more permission seekers who wait for others to authorize their contributions. The world needs people who recognize their own authority and use it to create value, solve problems, and advance human capabilities through strategic action rather than bureaucratic approval. The control you've been seeking from others, permission to pursue your goals, authorization to express your ideas, approval to make choices that serve your development. None of this requires anyone else's consent. The authority to direct your own life, to pursue your authentic interests, and to create value according to your vision has always belonged to you. You don't need permission to develop your capabilities. You don't need authorization to pursue opportunities that interest you. You don't need approval to make decisions that serve your long-term objectives. You don't need anyone's consent to become everything you're capable of becoming. The moment you stop asking and start taking, not through aggression or violation of others' rights, but through strategic action and competent execution, you begin developing the authentic authority that makes others' permission irrelevant. If you choose to continue seeking permission, understand what you're accepting. You're choosing to remain dependent on others' judgment about what you should be allowed to do with your own life. You're accepting that your potential will be limited by others' vision, comfort, and interests, rather than by your actual capabilities. You're agreeing to waste your remaining years waiting for others to recognize what you could demonstrate through your own actions. You're committing to live as a subordinate in your own existence, constantly seeking validation from people who have no legitimate authority over your authentic choices. But if you choose to take control without apology, you're accepting something far more challenging and infinitely more rewarding. You're choosing to trust your own judgment, to act according to your own assessment of what's possible, and to create results that speak louder than any permission could authorize. You're accepting responsibility for outcomes that you can no longer blame on others' failure to support you. You're embracing the uncertainty that comes with autonomous action while gaining the satisfaction that comes from creating your own opportunities rather than waiting for others to provide them. You now stand at the moment of ultimate choice. Everything you've learned tonight converges on a single recognition that will determine the entire trajectory of your remaining life. You already possess all the authority you need to take control of your circumstances and create the life you actually want to live. The most insidious aspect of the control is given myth is how it creates deep psychological patterns that make people actively collaborate in their own powerlessness. This collaboration doesn't happen through conscious choice, but through unconscious conditioning that transforms natural authority into chronic permission-seeking behavior. From earliest childhood, you were systematically trained to seek approval before acting, to ask for validation before expressing yourself, and to wait for authorization before pursuing your authentic desires. This training created neural pathways that associate action with the need for external permission, making independent choice feel dangerous and unauthorized behavior feel morally wrong. Consider how this conditioning operates in the developing mind. The child who acts independently is corrected, punished, or made to feel guilty about their autonomous behavior. The child who waits for permission is praised, rewarded, and made to feel virtuous about their compliance. Over time, this pattern creates deep psychological associations between permission-seeking and safety, between autonomy and danger. These early associations become so embedded in the psyche that they operate automatically in adult situations where no external authority actually exists. The adult continues asking for permission in contexts where no one has the right to grant or deny permission, continues seeking approval from people whose opinions shouldn't matter, continues waiting for authorization from authorities who have no legitimate power over their choices. The permission-seeking pattern manifests differently across various life domains, but follows the same basic psychological structure. In career situations, you ask for opportunities rather than creating them. Seek approval for your ideas rather than implementing them, and wait for others to recognize your potential rather than demonstrating it through independent action. In relationships, you seek validation for your feelings rather than trusting your own emotional responses. Ask for others' opinions about personal decisions that only affect you, and modify your behavior based on others' comfort rather than your own authentic preferences. In creative endeavors, you wait for others to appreciate your work before considering it valuable. Seek permission to express controversial ideas rather than speaking your truth, and abandon projects when they don't receive immediate external validation. This permission-seeking psychology creates what researchers call external locus of control, the belief that your outcomes are determined primarily by external forces rather than your own choices and actions. The person with external locus of control experiences life as something that happens to them rather than something they create through their decisions. This external orientation makes them perpetually dependent on others for motivation, direction, and validation. They can't start projects without encouragement, can't make decisions without consultation, and can't maintain effort without ongoing approval from others. They become psychological dependents who require constant external support to function effectively. The psychology of permission-seeking also creates what we might call authority addiction, the compulsive need to find external authorities who will tell you what to do, think, and value. The authority addict cannot tolerate the uncertainty and responsibility that come with autonomous decision-making, so they constantly seek experts, gurus, and leaders who will provide the guidance they feel incapable of generating themselves. This authority addiction keeps them trapped in cycles of dependency, where they never develop their own judgment, never trust their own capabilities, and never experience the satisfaction that comes from creating results through their own efforts. They remain perpetual students, followers, and subordinates because they've never learned to authorize their own actions. Perhaps most destructively, the permission-seeking psychology creates what psychologists call learned helplessness, the belief that you cannot influence outcomes even when you actually possess the capability to do so. This learned helplessness develops when repeated experiences of seeking permission teach you that control lies outside yourself rather than within your own choices. The person with learned helplessness doesn't just lack confidence, they actively avoid opportunities to exercise control because they've learned to associate autonomous action with failure, rejection, or punishment. They choose limitation over possibility, dependence over independence, and subordination over leadership, because these choices feel safer than risking the disapproval that might come from taking control. The permission-seeking pattern also creates what we might call validation addiction, the compulsive need for others' approval before considering your thoughts, feelings, or actions legitimate. The validation addict cannot make decisions, express opinions, or take actions without first receiving confirmation from others that these behaviors are acceptable. This validation dependency makes them extremely vulnerable to manipulation by anyone who understands how to provide or withhold the approval they desperately seek. They become easy to control because they've made their psychological well-being dependent on external validation rather than developing internal sources of self-worth and direction. The most tragic aspect of permission-seeking psychology is how it prevents people from discovering their actual capabilities. When you never act without permission, you never learn what you're truly capable of achieving through your own efforts. When you never make decisions without external validation, you never develop the judgment that comes from experiencing the consequences of your choices. The permission seeker lives their entire life within the boundaries that others have established, rather than exploring the full range of possibilities available to them. They die without ever knowing what they could have created, achieved, or become if they had developed the courage to act according to their own authority, rather than constantly seeking others' authorization. Breaking free from permission-seeking psychology requires recognizing that most of the authorities you seek permission from have no legitimate power over your choices. They cannot actually stop you from pursuing your goals, expressing your thoughts, or making the decisions that serve your authentic development. Their authority over you exists only because you grant it to them through your belief that their permission is necessary. The moment you recognize that you already possess the authority to make your own choices, express your own thoughts, and pursue your own goals, the entire permission-seeking system collapses. You discover that the control you've been seeking from others has always been available to you. You simply needed the courage to exercise it without apology.